They told me there wasn't enough space for me at the family retreat. 66 people had a bed, a seat at the table, a place in the photos. I was the missing piece, erased like I'd never belonged. My name is Evelyn Hart, 37, the daughter who once organized those retreats, the glue that held everyone together. But this year, my own family said I didn't fit, so I made a choice. If they wouldn't make room for me, I would build my own. What followed wasn't revenge. It was the story of reclaiming a place that was always mine. The call came on a Tuesday evening, just as I was stirring pasta sauce in my tiny apartment kitchen. My phone lit up with Mom across the screen, and for a brief, naive moment, I felt a flicker of excitement. This was the week she usually called about retreat logistics, and I assumed she wanted my help, the way she always had. 15 years of retreats, and I had been the planner, the fixer, the quiet hand behind the scenes that made everything seamless. Evelyn! Her voice was sugar-sweet, the tone she used when she knew she was about to bruise. About the family retreat this year, we've run into a problem. The cabins at Silver Birch Lodge are a bit smaller than expected. There just isn't enough space for everyone. I kept stirring, half smiling, not yet understanding. Do we need to book overflow rooms? I have a contact at their corporate office. Maybe I can negotiate a block rate. Silence. Then a throat clear. It's not that simple. We had to make some difficult decisions about who could attend. Since you're on your own now and the others have spouses and children, well, we thought it made the most sense. Her words hit like a hand pressed against my chest. My spoon froze midair. Wait, are you saying I'm not invited? Oh, Evelyn, don't be dramatic. We're just prioritizing couples and families. You understand? It's practical. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles whitened. Practical. The word echoed, hollow and cruel. 66 relatives had been counted, housed, assigned beds, and somehow there wasn't room for me, the daughter who once crafted welcome baskets for each family member, who negotiated group discounts, who scheduled children's scavenger hunts and sunset bonfires. I had given myself to this tradition, and now I was disposable. I hung up with my mother's maybe next year, still ringing in my ears. My hands trembled as I opened Instagram, a masochistic compulsion. There they were, Cole's wife posting shopping bags tagged Botch Retreat, ready. Fiona sharing photos of matching outfits for the twins. Mason hinting at a family photo shoot. They were all buzzing with anticipation. I wasn't missing because of lack of space. I was erased. Then it happened. A message pinged from Lily, my youngest sister, meant for the new family group chat I had been excluded from, a screenshot of the retreat schedule and room assignments. At first, just a blur of names and numbers. Then my eyes snagged on one entry. Cabin 7, Fiona, Daniel, twins, plus Nathan Guest. Nathan, my ex-husband, the man who had carried on a 3-year affair with his assistant while smiling at me across holiday tables. Invited, welcomed, given a cabin bed while I was deemed an unnecessary burden. My chest caved in, a sharp ache expanding until it filled my throat. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat cross-legged on my couch, lights off, scrolling through years of retreat photos. Me at the grill flipping burgers, me organizing the kids into relay teams, me decorating cabins with lanterns. My fingerprints were on every memory, yet my place had been scrubbed away. By morning, exhaustion and despair pushed me to call Dr. Priya Kapoor, my therapist. She listened quietly as I recounted the phone call, the room list, the sight of Nathan's name. Evelyn, she said gently, this isn't new. This is your family's pattern. Achievement over authenticity, image over truth. Nathan fits the story they want to project. You, divorced and still rebuilding, do not. Her words cut, but they also clarified. For years I had felt the undercurrent, my mother's thinly veiled disappointment, my father's silence, the comparisons to siblings with their glossy marriages and thriving children. Now it was exposed, raw and undeniable. Later that evening, Tessa came over with takeout and wine. I spilled everything, my shame, my anger, my disbelief. She listened, eyes flashing with indignation. This isn't about space, she declared. This is about control. They're punishing you for breaking their illusion of perfection, but you don't need their seat to matter. Don't beg for their table, Evie. Build your own. Her words lit something inside me, a small, defiant flame. I wasn't ready to imagine what my own table meant, but the phrase lodged itself in my bones. For the first time since the call, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt the faintest stir of air in my lungs. The retreat was 2 weeks away. I had been cast out, but maybe, just maybe, that exile could become a beginning. The call came as I stirred pasta sauce, wooden spoon circling in lazy loops. My phone buzzed on the counter, the screen flashing "Mom." For a moment I smiled, expecting her usual request for help with retreat planning, discount negotiations, kid activities, welcome baskets. It had been my role for 15 years. I wiped my hand and answered. "Evelyn," she began, her voice dipped in honey. "There isn't enough space this year. The cabins at Silver Birch can't hold everyone. We had to make hard choices, and since you're on your own now, it makes more sense to prioritize couples and children. You understand, right?" The spoon froze mid-stir, dripping red sauce back into the pot. My chest hollowed. "Wait, are you saying I'm not invited?" "Oh, don't be dramatic. It's just practical." Her word hung in the air like a hammer. Practical. 66 relatives had a bed, a chair, a place at the table. I was the empty seat. I ended the call quickly before my voice could break, but the silence that followed roared. My phone buzzed again, this time with a sharp beep. A group notification. My heart sank as I read the title. Family Core. A new chat, spun up without me. They hadn't just trimmed space, they had carved me out of the center. Scrolling, I saw their chatter. Shopping lists, jokes, emojis. My name was nowhere. Each ping was another nail sealing me outside. In a daze, I clicked over to Instagram. There it was. Fiona, my sister, posting a bright photo with a caption, "Checking in early at Silver Birch." So excited for the week ahead. The date glared back at me. Early check-in, meaning this plan had been solidified long before my mother's syrupy phone call. They had known. They had lied. My stomach twisted as if the sauce on the stove had curdled. They hadn't stumbled into excluding me. They had orchestrated it. Hours later, a message slid across my screen from Lily, the youngest, clearly meant for the family core thread. She'd sent it to me by mistake. A spreadsheet of room assignments. My eyes ran down the list, counting. 30 names, 40, 50, 60, 66 slots. I whispered the number aloud like a curse. And then my gaze landed on a line. Cabin 7, Fiona, Daniel, twins, plus Nathan Guest, Nathan, my ex-husband. The man who had betrayed me for 3 years with his assistant, smiling across holiday tables while weaving lies. Invited, given a bed, counted as family while I was erased. My body shook, hands gripping the counter until the edges bit into my palms. 66 chairs filled, none for me. Each name a verdict, each bed assignment a reminder. You don't belong. Later that night, still sleepless, I pulled open old photos of retreats past, me lighting bonfires, lining picnic tables with lanterns, corralling children into scavenger hunts. My fingerprints were everywhere, proof of belonging. Now scrubbed clean. The next day, I collapsed onto Dr. Priya Kapoor's couch, words spilling. She listened, steady as always. "Evelyn," she said softly, "what you're describing is a family system that values image over truth. Nathan represents their story of perfection. Successful, charming, intact. You, divorced and still rebuilding, threaten that image." Her clarity pierced the fog. It wasn't lack of space. It was rejection, deliberate and calculated. That evening, Tessa dropped by with Chinese takeout, her energy sharp with outrage. As I replayed the story, her eyes darkened. "This isn't about beds, Evie. This is about control, about punishment. They cut you out to protect their illusion. Don't beg for a chair at their table. Build your own." Her words struck like a match against flint. For the first time since the spoon froze in my hand, I felt the faint warmth of fire. The retreat was 2 weeks away. 66 names were written. Mine was not. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The morning after Tessa's words, I woke with a strange clarity humming in my chest. My first instinct had been to storm Silver Birch, to crash the retreat and force my parents to face me. But that would only confirm the family narrative, that I was bitter, unstable, hungry for attention. If I was going to act, it had to be strategic. I opened my laptop and typed the resort's name into the search bar. Within minutes, my mother's not-so-subtle posts tagged at Silver Birch confirmed the exact location. Just below it, another listing caught my eye. Blue Heron Point Estate, a private property on the same lake, available for short-term rental. I clicked. The photos nearly stole my breath. A glass-walled mansion perched at the water's edge, an infinity pool blending into the horizon, a chef's kitchen gleaming like a stage, 8 bedrooms, a home theater, dock access. It wasn't just a house, it was a declaration. Then I saw the price. My stomach dropped. It would devour my savings whole. Still, I picked up the phone. Blue Heron Properties, this is Barbara. Her voice was brisk but warm. I explained vaguely that I was considering the estate for a small retreat. She confirmed my fears about the cost, but then, we had a cancellation for those dates. The owner would prefer to recover something rather than nothing. If you're serious, I can offer 40% off. 40%? It was still extravagant, but not impossible. My hand shook as I scribbled numbers on a notepad. If I kept activities lean and called in favors, maybe, just maybe, I could pull it off. I hung up and immediately began dialing. Julian, an old client now in luxury hospitality. Evie, long time, what's up? When I told him I needed contacts who'd extend professional courtesy rates, he didn't hesitate. Consider it done. I'll connect you with vendors. Why, next, Maggie, my former assistant turned event planner. She squealed when I asked for help. Say less. I'll coordinate logistics and Paul and I will come for moral support. Any excuse to see you outshine those people. By midday, I had a spreadsheet open. Guest list, activities, costs. Tessa already confirmed. Julian and his partner Stephen would come. Maggie and Paul, too. I thought of Lindsay, a colleague turned micro-influencer. Her presence would guarantee polished photos that my family couldn't ignore. Within hours, 10 names filled the list, friends who actually wanted me there. For activities, I tapped into memory. My family always did lake swims and canoeing. I wanted something similar but fresher. Kayaks for mornings, a pontoon boat for afternoons. 2 jet skis rented for high-visibility fun when the resort crowd would be out. I discovered Blue Heron had room for a temporary pickleball court, a perfect lure since my siblings had been obsessed with the sport lately. And for evenings, instead of a stiff dining hall, I envisioned a wood-fired pizza oven brought to the terrace. Casual, communal, impossible to resist. The more I planned, the steadier my breathing became. For weeks, I had felt powerless, crushed by exclusion. Now each line I typed gave me back a piece of control. By evening, Barbara emailed the final contract. I hesitated only a moment before signing. With one click, I had secured Blue Heron Point Estate. It was reckless, maybe foolish, but it was mine. That night, I poured a glass of wine and studied my plan. The budget was tight, but possible. The activities weren't about showing off. They were about creating the atmosphere my family had denied me. Laughter echoing over water, food shared under string lights, children playing without judgment hovering overhead. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. For the first time since my mother's voice dripped through the phone, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, anticipation. Barbara called me back 2 days later to finalize details. Her tone was careful, professional, but something in her pause made me press. Be honest with me, I asked. Was there really no space at Silver Birch? She hesitated. Between you and me? The lodge had more than enough capacity. I don't know why your family said otherwise. The cabins can fit closer to 75, if not 80, when configured properly. Her words struck like ice water, so it hadn't been a matter of logistics at all. My parents' explanation, prioritizing couples and children, was a pretext, nothing more. They had chosen to exclude me. Later that afternoon, Tessa stopped by, waving her phone. You won't believe what just landed in my inbox. She slid the screen across the table. It was an email thread forwarded by a mutual acquaintance in catering. Attached was a vendor invoice for the retreat, and there, at the bottom, a line item, sponsored by Nathan Reed. I stared at the name until the letters blurred. He sponsored them? Looks like he covered the welcome reception costs. Just a few thousand, but enough to slap his name on the banner, which makes him a VIP, apparently. The golden guest. The bile rose in my throat. Not only had my family welcomed him, they had let him purchase his way into pride of place. My absence wasn't just tolerated, it had been traded for his visibility. That night, as I tried to focus on logistics, Tessa's voice cut through again. "Evie, you need to see this." She forwarded me another document, this one pulled from a friend in event planning. A clause buried in the lodge's contract. Cancellation allowed in case of reputational risk, signed by Margaret Hart. I read it twice, my vision tunneling. Reputational risk. My mother had personally signed off on a policy that allowed them to drop me if my presence threatened their polished facade. She hadn't just excluded me, she had safeguarded the option in writing. The puzzle pieces snapped together with cruel precision. The lack of space was a story. Nathan's sponsorship provided cover, and my mother's obsession with image sealed it. I closed my eyes, the weight pressing down. For years, I had suspected my place in the family was conditional, that love was transactional. Now I had proof, written in emails and contracts. But despair wasn't what rose next. It was something steadier. Cold, yes, but clear. If they had built a narrative where I was the unstable, negative one, then fighting them directly would only feed it. I couldn't win by yelling louder. Instead, I would shift the spotlight. That night, I drafted my strategy. I wouldn't badmouth them, wouldn't leak their lies, wouldn't scream at their hypocrisy. I would simply live. Publicly, visibly, joyfully. Every photo, every shared meal, every laugh across Blue Heron's terrace would be captured and posted. Not curated perfection, but real connection. My family had weaponized image. I would reclaim it by showing the truth. I pictured it. Children splashing from kayaks, friends raising glasses at sunset, the glow of pizza ovens under string lights. Images so alive they couldn't be ignored. Let them see, let them wonder, let the contrast speak louder than any accusation. By the time I shut my laptop, my chest no longer felt hollow. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just reacting. I was directing. Blue Heron Point Estate rose from the shoreline like glass carved into the woods. When I first arrived, the midday sun blazed across its windows, turning the house into a mirror that reflected the lake back at itself. Barbara, the property manager, walked me through. The great room soaring 2 stories high, a chef's kitchen with counters that gleamed, an infinity pool where the water seemed to spill into the lake. It felt less like a house and more like a stage. By late afternoon, my friends began arriving. Tessa first, arms full of wine and laughter. Then Maggie and Paul, grinning as if they'd been waiting for this rebellion their whole lives. Julian and Stephen came next, bringing a kind of polished charisma that immediately filled the air with warmth. Soon, the terrace echoed with voices, bags unzipped, the shuffle of footsteps as people claimed bedrooms. That evening, we gathered for our welcome dinner. Daniel, the chef I'd coaxed into joining, prepared roasted vegetables, seared trout, bread still warm from the oven. We sat on the terrace, the infinity pool glowing, string lights flickering as if stars had dropped to visit. Conversation flowed easily. No one mentioned Nathan. No one asked about my mother. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't a complication. I was simply Evelyn, laughing, pouring wine, passing plates. When I lay down that night, the lake visible through floor-to-ceiling glass, I felt a peace that surprised me. Yes, tomorrow I would see them across the water. Yes, the lie still burned. But here, in this house, I had created something else. The next morning dawned bright, the surface of the lake so smooth it looked painted. We carried kayaks to the dock, sliding them into the water with small splashes. I steadied myself, paddle in hand, and pushed out. Halfway to the center, I heard voices carrying across the lake, children shrieking, adults calling, my family, gathered at Silver Birch's beach. My chest tightened, but I kept paddling. When I glanced up, I caught the moment recognition flickered. My mother, in her wide-brimmed hat, stood frozen. Fiona pointed. Mason shaded his eyes. Even from a distance, I felt the hush ripple through them. I lifted a hand, smiling lightly, as though waving to neighbors rather than the people who had declared no space for me. Then I turned back to Julian beside me, continuing our conversation. My heart pounded, but my face held steady. By noon, we changed clothes and drove to a nearby winery for lunch. The terrace overlooked rolling hills, glasses of chilled rosé catching the light. I had just settled into my chair when I felt a presence shift. At the table across from us, my mother, Fiona, and two aunts were being seated. The silence hit first. My mother's brittle smile cracked her face. "Evelyn!" she exclaimed too brightly. "What a surprise! I thought you were in Miami for work." Her words scraped, but I steadied my breath. "Change of plans. I rented Blue Heron Point with some friends. Looks like we're neighbors this week." My Aunt Clara's brow furrowed. "But Margaret, you said Evelyn couldn't come because of work commitments." The flush that spread across my mother's cheeks was worth more than any speech I could have given. She stammered something about miscommunication, but the damage was done. I gestured to my companions, introducing each with deliberate ease. Julian spoke of his work in hospitality, Stephen of his design firm. Maggie joked about logistics. Paul chimed in with humor. They weren't just my friends. They were proof of the life I had beyond the family's narrative. For a few minutes, we lingered in that strange bubble, my mother trying to hold her composure, my aunts darting glances between us. Then I smiled, stood, and excused myself. "Enjoy your lunch. We should get back to ours." Back at my own table, Tessa leaned in, grinning. "You were perfect." "Did you see her face? Like biting into a lemon." I laughed, the sound freer than it had been in months. For once, I hadn't begged, hadn't defended. I had simply existed, visibly, undeniably, right where they thought I couldn't be. That evening, as the sun sank into the lake, streaking the surface with molten gold, I slipped outside to breathe. The estate's terrace overlooked silver birch, the lodge glowing faintly across the water. From here, the lake was a mirror, reflecting both houses as if they were twin worlds, close enough to touch, yet impossibly far apart. "Evelyn," a voice whispered. I turned to see my cousin Dana hovering at the edge of the dock. She'd crossed over under the guise of a walk. Her face was tight, conflicted. "I shouldn't even be here," she murmured, glancing nervously back toward the lodge. "But I needed to tell you something." My pulse quickened. "What?" "They've been saying you declined the invitation yourself, that you told Aunt Margaret you were too busy with work. Everyone believes you chose not to come." The words sliced. My own absence wasn't just tolerated, it had been rewritten as my choice. A neat lie, designed to shield them from blame. Dana's eyes darted again. "I thought you should know. I don't agree with it. I couldn't keep quiet." Then she squeezed my hand and hurried away before anyone could notice. I stood on the dock, the lake still and gleaming under twilight, fury churning in my stomach. Not only had they erased me, they'd painted me complicit. Later that night, as I reviewed the activity schedule with Maggie, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. My chest tightened. The text contained a blurry photo, the retreat's room assignment board. Highlighted in red was the line, "Cabin 7, Fiona, Daniel, twins, plus Nathan Guest." Beneath it, scrawled like a taunt, "Don't come ruin this. Don't make it worse." I stared until the screen blurred. Anonymous or not, the message was unmistakable. A warning, a boundary drawn in cruelty, as if my presence itself was contamination. I tossed the phone down, breath ragged. For a moment I considered deleting it, pretending it hadn't arrived. But no, this too was proof. A piece of the pattern. The following afternoon, as I was arranging kayaks on the dock, my father appeared. His figure was stiff against the backdrop of the lake, his jaw set. "Evelyn," he said without preamble, "I hope you'll be careful. Your mother is already upset. Tomorrow evening important guests are joining us. Business associates. It would be easier if you kept a low profile." I blinked. "Business associates? You mean the extra people counted in the 66? He didn't answer directly, only looked away toward the horizon. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." His words sank like stones. So that was it. This wasn't just about Nathan or about family dynamics. There were interests at stake, relationships my father wanted to protect. I wasn't merely inconvenient. I was a liability to be managed. I bit back the urge to demand explanations. Instead, I nodded slowly, forcing calm. "I hear you, Dad." As he walked away, I looked out over the lake again. The water lay still, reflecting both estates perfectly. Two worlds mirrored, one curated, one raw. They seemed to touch, yet the gap between them yawned, impassable. That night, when laughter floated across from silver birch, I listened but did not flinch. I poured wine for my friends, set down plates of roasted chicken, and let our voices carry too. Not louder, not competing, simply present. The lake held both reflections side by side, one a family built on denial and image, the other a gathering built on truth, however imperfect. For the first time, I realized the mirror didn't need to merge, it only needed to reveal. The first weekend at Blue Heron unfolded like a carefully choreographed play, though I hadn't scripted a single moment. Saturday morning, the pontoon boat arrived, gleaming under the sun, stocked with coolers and bright floaties. By noon, laughter spilled across the water as we anchored near the cove. My friends lounged on deck chairs while music hummed from a portable speaker. The scene radiated ease, almost theatrical in contrast to the stiff order of silver birch across the lake. I caught sight of my nieces first. They were splashing near the silver birch dock, but their attention snapped to our side when they saw the pontoon with its music and colorful floats. Soon, they were shouting, "Aunt Evie!" their voices carrying clear over the water. I waved, heart squeezing. Within minutes, Mason's daughter, little Maya, was tugging his arm, begging to come across. He looked torn, glancing back toward the lodge. But eventually, he relented, paddling over with her on a borrowed kayak. "Just for a few minutes," he said stiffly as Maya scrambled onto the pontoon. Yet once she was there, she dove into the water, shrieking with joy as my friends cheered her on. Mason eased onto a chair, shoulders slowly relaxing. We didn't talk about why he was there. We didn't talk about the retreat. We just handed him a drink, and for a brief span of time, we were simply cousins sharing the sun. The momentum grew. By late afternoon, more children swam our way, trailing laughter like ribbons across the lake. Parents followed reluctantly, then lingered. By the time the sun began to lower, our boat looked like the center of gravity itself, pulling family members toward it, one by one. That night, the wood-fired pizza oven was delivered. We set it up on the terrace, dough rolled thin, toppings spread across a long table. Flames leapt as pies slid onto the stone, bubbling in seconds. The smell alone was magnetic. The first knock came from Lily, my youngest sister, children in tow. "The kids smelled it from the dock," she said, half apologetic. "Do you mind if we—" I grinned and waved them in. "There's plenty." Soon after, cousins wandered over, curious, lured by the scent and laughter echoing from Blue Heron. By 9 o'clock, our terrace was buzzing with chatter, hands passing plates, wine glasses clinking. The children built towers of crusts, daring each other to taste new toppings. The oven's heat cast everyone in a warm glow, blurring lines of invitation and allegiance. I stuck to my rule. No mentions of exclusion, no bitter words. When Lily asked about the estate, I simply said, "It felt right," and left it there. When Mason muttered something about scheduling, I shrugged lightly. "We'll figure it out." The silence I chose was louder than any accusation. Still, beneath the joy, a low thrum of unease persisted. I knew word would travel back. I knew my mother's brittle smile would falter when she realized her carefully managed retreat was bleeding guests. The laughter rising from our terrace wasn't just sound. It was gravity, shifting, pulling. As the night ended, I stood at the railing, watching the opposite shore. Silver birch glowed faintly, lights burning steady and still. But the dock was quiet. No music, no bursts of laughter. Just the faint hum of crickets. Beside me, Tessa nudged my arm. "You realize what's happening, don't you? They're crossing over, not because you asked, but because they want to. That's powerful." I exhaled slowly, the weight pressing against my ribs. It was powerful, yes, but it was also dangerous. Every smile at my table, every cousin who lingered, every child who begged for another ride, it all pushed closer to a reckoning I couldn't avoid. The gravity was shifting, and sooner or later, someone would explode. Sunday morning was supposed to be the day of the grand family photo. Silver Birch had hired a professional photographer scheduled for golden hour, the same ritual every year. Everyone lined up on the lodge lawn, color-coordinated, rows of smiling faces projecting unity. It was my mother's crown jewel, proof of the Hart family's shining perfection. Except this year, half the cast was missing. I heard about it later from Lily, whispered as though she were confessing a crime. "They couldn't get everyone together," she admitted, eyes flicking nervously. Too many people had wandered over here. The kids refused to leave the jet skis, and Mason, well, he stayed because Maya wouldn't stop crying to go back. I pictured it clearly. The photographer waiting, my mother's tight smile cracking as she counted gaps in her lineup, the facade unraveling with every empty space. My absence had been manageable. But this? This was exposure. By noon, the tension broke through in the form of a phone call. My mother's voice was sharp, her composure stripped away. Evelyn, this has gone far enough. You've been luring family members away, bribing them with expensive toys and food. It's manipulative, and it's cruel. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. I haven't lured anyone. They chose to come. All I did was open my door. You've always needed to be the center of attention, she snapped, and now you're destroying our tradition. Before I could respond, voices floated in from the terrace. My aunts, Clara and June, laughing with Maggie as she explained the pizza oven. They were asking questions, jotting down notes about dough hydration and flour ratios. Fascinated. The irony struck hard. My mother accused me of manipulation, but her own sisters were sidling up to my table, curious, eager to replicate what I'd created. Neutral parties were tilting, ever so subtly, away from her control. That afternoon, as the jet skis sliced across the water, I followed one with my eyes. The white spray behind it glimmered like a brushstroke across the lake, each line rewriting the narrative my mother tried so desperately to hold. Every child laughing in the wake was another word in that counterstory, one I hadn't needed to script. Then came the moment I hadn't planned. My photographer friend Lindsay was snapping candid shots. Friends on the terrace, cousins clustered around the oven, kids squealing in life vests. Later, as she flipped through her camera, she paused. You might want to see this. The photo was crisp. Nathan on the silver birch dock, head bent in close conversation with a man I didn't recognize at first. Then it clicked. Mr. Collins, one of my father's longtime business associates. Their hands were clasped in that too firm shake, their smiles thin and transactional. The knot in my stomach tightened. This wasn't casual. Nathan hadn't just sponsored a reception. He was networking, embedding himself deeper into my father's professional world. His presence wasn't family loyalty, it was leverage. I set the camera down, heart pounding. The implications were heavy. If Nathan could tie himself to my father's business dealings, he became more than just an unwelcome ghost of my past. He became a strategic pawn my parents had chosen to protect. That night, as twilight painted the lake, I watched the jet skis circle one last time, their wakes crisscrossing like strokes of defiance. Each line shimmered under fading light, a visible reminder that stories could be rewritten, even over the same surface. Still, unease coiled under my ribs. The gravity was shifting, yes, but toward a collision I could no longer avoid. The evening sun poured molten light across the terrace, painting the water in shades of copper and fire. I was arranging glasses on the table when the doorbell chimed, an unfamiliar sound in this borrowed house. Tessa moved toward it, but I raised a hand. I'll get it. When I opened the door, my mother stood there. Margaret Hart, impeccably dressed as always, her linen blouse pressed, her pearl necklace gleaming. But her face was taut, lips thinned to a single pale line. May I come in? She asked, though it wasn't a request. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the terrace. Of course. Would you like some water? Lemon, maybe? No, thank you. She perched on the edge of a chair, her handbag clutched to her chest like armor. For a moment, we sat in silence. The cicadas hummed, the lake lapped softly. Then she struck. This needs to stop, Evelyn. You've had your fun, but it's gone too far. Hosting elaborate dinners, renting jet skis, filling the lake with noise. You're disrupting the retreat. Her words were sharp, meant to wound, but I steadied myself. I poured a glass of water anyway and set it in front of her. I'm not disrupting anything, Mom. I'm hosting my own gathering with people who want to be here. That's all. You've always been like this, she snapped. Always needing attention, always undermining. And now you're stealing family away. Do you know the photographer had to reschedule the family photo yesterday? Half the children were at your house. The accusation stung, but I didn't flinch. I didn't steal anyone. I didn't call. I didn't beg. They came because they wanted to. There's a difference. She bristled, color rising in her cheeks. You don't understand what you're doing. You're making me look—" She stopped short, catching herself. I leaned forward, voice calm. "Look how, Mom. Less in control? Less perfect?" Her eyes flickered, and for the first time, she looked unsettled. Before the silence could deepen, footsteps sounded on the gravel. My brother Tyler appeared, hands shoved in his pockets, expression uneasy. "Mom," he said, "Dad's looking for you. The caterer has a question about tomorrow's dinner." She stood abruptly, adjusting her blouse as if the gesture could smooth away the cracks in her composure. "This conversation isn't finished," she said, her voice clipped. I nodded. "I'll be here when you're ready to continue." She swept past Tyler without another glance. For a long moment, he stayed where he was, staring at the ground. Then he looked up, his voice low. "For what it's worth, Evie, I told them it was wrong not to invite you. I should have pushed harder." The admission startled me. Tyler, the golden child, the steady heir to Dad's approval, rarely voiced dissent. I searched his face for irony, but found only weariness. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means more than you think." He nodded once, then turned back toward Silver Birch, his shoulders heavy. As the sun slid lower, I returned to the terrace. My guests carried on, laughter spilling, music humming, pizza dough stretching beneath quick hands. Yet my heart beat with a strange rhythm, a mix of triumph and dread. For the first time, my mother's mask had cracked. The brittle perfection she wore like armor had slipped, revealing raw nerves beneath. But the exposure meant escalation. The crest of the wave was near. I could feel it. The confrontation came the next afternoon, when paths quite literally crossed. I had been walking with Tessa and Maggie along the trail that cut between Blue Heron and Silver Birch, our conversation light, when a cluster of figures emerged from the opposite direction. My parents, Fiona and Daniel, several cousins, and Nathan, walking at the center like he belonged there. The moment bristled with tension, air thick enough to choke. "Well, isn't this convenient?" Nathan said, voice dripping with false cheer. "Evelyn and her circus, still desperate to be the center of attention, I see." I froze, every muscle taut, but before I could answer, he pressed on. "You've always had a flair for drama, negative energy everywhere you go. Maybe that's why your marriage didn't work. Maybe that's why your family prefers peace without you." The words cracked like a whip, designed to humiliate. My breath caught, but then Daniel stepped forward. His face was calm, but his eyes blazed. "Enough," he said sharply. "You don't get to smear her like that." Nathan sneered. "Oh, really? And what would you know about it?" Daniel held up his phone. "I know because I've seen the proof. Your texts, the ones you sent to your assistant while you were still married to Evelyn. 3 years' worth of affairs, lies, and smug boasts. You played the faithful husband while betraying her every chance you got." A ripple of shock spread through the group. Fiona, usually so careful to remain neutral, stepped closer to me. "He's telling the truth," she said, her voice firm. "I saw them too. I shouldn't have doubted you, Evie, not for a second." Nathan's face twisted, but before he could fire back, my mother broke. Her composure, so carefully stitched for decades, split wide open. "Of course she's the problem," she shouted, her voice raw. "Evelyn has always been the problem. Always difficult. Always dramatic. Always dragging us down. She couldn't keep her husband, couldn't keep her job, and now she's trying to tear this family apart." The words echoed across the trail, silencing even the birds. My cousins stared, stunned. For years they had seen only Margaret Hart, the flawless matriarch. Now they saw the Fishers. I stood frozen, not with shame, but with clarity. This was it, the mask gone, the wound laid bare. Then came the final twist. Mr. Collins, one of my father's business associates, stepped forward. He had been walking with them, quietly observing. "I only came to discuss the deal," he said slowly, glancing between my father and Nathan. "It was Nathan who introduced us. I was told he was practically family." My father's jaw clenched, his silence damning. The truth crystallized. Nathan wasn't just tolerated. He was leveraged. My parents had chosen him because he offered business connections. For a moment, everything inside me shook. Anger, grief, disbelief. But when I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "I'm not here to compete for a seat," I said, looking at each of them. "I'm not fighting for scraps of space at your table. I built my own, and anyone who feels they belong is welcome to sit with me." Silence followed, deep and resonant, broken only by the soft lap of water against the shore. Nathan's smirk faltered. Fiona's hand slipped into Daniel's. My cousins shifted uneasily, eyes flicking between me and my mother, and for the first time, it wasn't me who looked unstable. It wasn't me who seemed desperate. It was them. The storm had broken, and what remained was only the echo. The morning after the storm, the lake looked like glass. Not a ripple, not a breeze, only the pale pink of dawn reflected across its surface. I sat on the terrace at Blue Heron, cradling a mug of coffee, my body still trembling from the confrontation. My mother's voice still rang in my ears. Evelyn has always been the problem, but instead of cutting me down, the memory felt strangely clarifying. The mask had slipped, and now everyone had seen what I'd carried alone for years. My phone buzzed, one message after another, a cascade of vibrations. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. "I'm so sorry, Evie. We had no idea. You didn't deserve that. We're with you." Each one was like a small stone placed in my palm, grounding me. The narrative was shifting. My family's whispers could no longer erase me. Around mid-morning, I heard the sound of children's laughter. Lily appeared at the path, her 2 kids running ahead with beach towels clutched in their fists. She looked tired, eyes rimmed red, but when she reached me, she managed a small smile. "They begged to stay here for the rest of the week," she said, half apologetic. "Honestly, I don't blame them. It feels lighter here." "Of course they can," I said. "There's plenty of room." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. While the kids splashed in the pool, Lily lingered beside me. "I should have spoken up," she whispered. "I knew it was wrong not to include you, but I was scared. I didn't want to be on the outside, too." Her words twisted inside me, painful but true. "I understand," I told her. "We've all been afraid of rocking the boat, but fear just kept the pattern alive. Maybe it's time to break it." She nodded, tears brimming. "You're braver than the rest of us." Later that afternoon, as the sun rose higher, I got another message, this time from my father. "Meet me at the dock." Alone. My chest tightened, but I went. The dock stretched out over the lake, planks weathered and gray, water slapping gently below. My father stood at the end, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the horizon. He looked older in that moment, shoulders stooped, the weight of years and choices pressing down. "Dad," I said quietly. He turned, eyes shadowed. "Evelyn, thank you for coming." We stood for a long moment in silence, the lake between us and the world. Finally, he sighed. "Your mother and we didn't handle this well. We thought excluding you would be easier than dealing with conflict. We told ourselves it was practical. But the truth is, it was cowardly." The words shocked me, not because they were harsh, but because they were honest. My father had never admitted weakness before. "I watched yesterday," he continued. "I saw the way Nathan spoke to you. I saw Fiona defend you, and I saw your mother lose control. We can't keep pretending appearances matter more than people. But your mother, she doesn't know how to let go of the image." I swallowed hard. "Dad, it wasn't just about appearances. It was about dignity. You invited the man who betrayed me and told me there was no room. Do you realize what that says?" His gaze dropped. "I do now, and I regret it." The silence stretched, heavy but not unbearable. Finally, he looked up again, eyes clear. "I can't undo what's been done. But I don't want to lose you, Evelyn. You are my daughter, always." For the first time in a long time, my throat ached, not from anger, but from something softer. I nodded slowly. "I don't need perfection, Dad. I just need truth. I can live with mistakes. I can't live with lies." He closed his eyes briefly, as if my words struck deep. Then he reached out, his hand weathered, uncertain. I took it, not as absolution, but as a beginning. As we stood on that dock, the lake mirrored us, 2 figures side by side, fragile, imperfect, but finally visible. My father and I stayed on the dock long after the words had settled, the lake shifting from soft blue to the harsher glare of afternoon. He rubbed the back of his neck, the way he always did when he was about to say something difficult. "There's more you need to know," he said finally. "The business deal we're negotiating, our expansion into New England, it's precarious. Collins and his partners insisted on stability, a family image that looked intact. That's why Nathan was invited. Your mother believed presenting him as part of the family would reassure them. It was a PR solution. I stared at him, stunned. So I was erased to make a brochure prettier? He flinched. I won't pretend it wasn't cruel, but Margaret convinced herself it was necessary. The words cut deeper than I expected. At least before, I could tell myself it was just favoritism or blindness. Now it was calculation. My worth weighed against optics and found lacking. I looked back across the lake, the silver birch cabins lined neatly against the shore. If the price of a deal is your daughter's dignity, maybe it's too high. He didn't argue. He only nodded, eyes heavy. You're right, but your mother, she carries ghosts of her own. That was when he told me, a story I had never heard. When Margaret was a girl about Lily's age, her mother, your grandmother, once left her at a bus depot for hours. Forgot her, or maybe didn't forget. She said it was punishment for being too difficult. Margaret never spoke of it, but I think that scar runs through everything. She's terrified of being left out, so she clutches control, curates every image. She doesn't know another way. I felt my anger stumble against that revelation. Not vanish, never vanish, but shift. Pain was a legacy in this family, passed like an heirloom. My mother hadn't invented her cruelty. She'd inherited abandonment and repackaged it as perfectionism. Before I could answer, Tessa came hurrying down the path, her phone in hand. You need to see this. She held out the screen. An email from Nathan blasted to several relatives and copied to me. His words dripped with venom, accusations of defamation, threats of legal action for slanderous lies about his affair. I skimmed the paragraphs, bile rising. At the end, his ultimatum: retract these falsehoods or face consequences. Before panic could tighten my throat, Daniel appeared behind Tessa, calm, steady, like always. I've already replied, he said. Told him to go ahead and try. Every message, every photo is archived. It's airtight. He has no case. Relief flooded me, followed quickly by something like awe. For so long I had stood alone, doubted, and dismissed. Now, at least here, someone else was standing firm in my defense. Later that night, word spread. Nathan had packed his things and left the resort under cover of darkness. No goodbyes, no explanations, just a disappearance, a retreat from the retreat. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, what I felt was stillness, like the lake at dawn, stripped of pretense, holding the reflection of what remained. When I finally spoke again to my father, my voice was quiet but sharp. If the family's image matters, then let's start here. I am part of it. That's the condition. Tolerating me halfway or swapping me for Nathan, it's not negotiable. You want stability? Then respect is the price. He looked at me for a long time, eyes clouded with regret, but also something steadier. Understood, he said simply. And with that, a line was drawn, not out of spite, but out of survival. The image would stand only if it could hold me too. The final morning of the retreat carried an odd quiet, as though the air itself had been drained of tension. Still, I knew I couldn't let the weekend without one more conversation. So I left Blue Heron behind and walked the path to Silver Birch. The lodge was hushed, families packing bags, children chasing each other through the grass. My mother sat alone on the deck, a book open but unread in her lap. She looked up as I approached, her expression guarded, neither hostile nor warm. Evelyn, she said, voice carefully neutral. Mom, I replied. I stood for a beat, then pulled out the chair across from her. I thought we should talk before everyone leaves. She shifted, her fingers tightening on the armrest. If you've come for an apology. I haven't, I interrupted gently. I don't expect one. I only want acknowledgement. What happened hurt. Excluding me hurt. Inviting Nathan hurt. And pretending I chose not to come. That hurt too. Her mouth pinched, eyes flicking away. For a long moment I thought she'd dismiss me again, but then she sighed, shoulders sinking. I suppose we handled it poorly. I thought keeping things orderly would protect the family. Maybe I was wrong. The admission was small, but it cracked the wall between us. For once, she wasn't dressing the wound in lace. I nodded. That's all I needed, the truth, even if it's hard. We didn't reconcile with tears or embraces, but there was a stillness, a recognition that if our relationship were to survive, it would be on new terms. That evening, the last night of the retreat, we tried something different. Instead of two separate feasts, we set long tables out on the beach, halfway between silver birch and blue heron. The sun sank as families drifted down, laying dishes across the sand-smoothed wood. Children darted back and forth, their laughter mingling with the scent of grilled fish and fire-lit smoke. At first, the air was tentative, conversations halting, glances cautious, but soon the rhythm built. Cousins swapping stories, uncles pouring wine, aunts laughing over memories. The tension didn't vanish, but it softened, like a knot slowly loosening. I sat with Lily and her children, watching their faces glow in the firelight. Across the table, Mason clinked glasses with Julian. Even Fiona, cautious all week, leaned toward me, her smile tentative but real. As plates were cleared and lanterns flickered on, my father rose. His voice carried just enough to still the group. "Next year," he said, glancing toward me, "Evelyn will be with us. Officially. And Nathan, he will not. He is not family. She is." The words sank deep, not as vindication, but as correction. A truth restored. My mother said nothing, but she didn't contradict him either. Later, when the last lanterns dimmed and people began to drift away, I lingered on the sand. The tables stood empty now, chairs pushed back, footprints stamped into the shoreline. I thought of the week, of the phone call that had begun it all. There isn't enough space. And yet here, under the wide night sky, we had created space. Tables stretched longer, chairs pulled close, children squeezed onto benches. There had been room after all. There had always been room, if only someone dared to build it. I brushed sand from my hands and breathed in the salt of the lake. My voice was low, spoken to no one in particular. When they don't make space, you build your own. And if you build it with truth, the ones who belong will always find their way. The water shimmered back at me as though agreeing. The morning after the shared dinner, the sand still bore the imprint of chair legs and footprints, as though the beach itself remembered. I walked along the waterline, the air crisp, when Lily caught up to me. Her children darted ahead, chasing gulls. "You know," she said, "maybe it's time we rethink how these retreats are run. It shouldn't all fall on Mom and Dad. It shouldn't be about control." Her words planted a seed. That evening, when the family gathered for a final meeting by the fire pit, I stood and let the idea spill. "What if we create a system?" I said, my voice steady, eyes sweeping across cousins, siblings, aunts. Each year, a different branch of the family takes the lead. No single gatekeeper, no secret lists. We vote on who's invited, openly. One rule: every chair is open unless a majority decides otherwise. No more invisible exclusions. There was a ripple of surprise, then murmurs. I braced for my mother's sharp rebuttal, but it never came. She sat stiffly, hands clasped, her jaw tight. For the first time, she didn't counter, didn't defend. She simply nodded once, a small surrender. The control she had clutched for decades loosened just slightly. That silence felt like a hinge creaking open. Fiona rose next. "If we're dividing responsibilities, I'll co-coordinate next year with Evelyn. She knows how to plan better than anyone, and I want to do this right, together." Her voice trembled, but the words landed like a vow. I swallowed hard, emotion burning my throat. Then Mason spoke up. "I'll take photos, document it all properly. No more doctored versions of who was there or not. We'll have proof of everyone who belongs." And Lily, with a soft smile, added, "I'll organize the kids' activities. Make sure they remember the fun, not the tension." For years, all power had sat in my parents' hands. Now, piece by piece, it shifted outward, spread among us, balanced, not a coup, but a redistribution. Later, as we packed for departure, my father pulled me aside. He held an envelope, simple and white. Inside was a printed invitation, next year's retreat dates already set. My name was bold, unmistakable at the top. No business partners, no outsiders, and certainly not Nathan, he said, his voice firm. "We will never trade you for a deal again. That's my promise." I met his gaze. "Then here's mine. If Nathan's ever invited again, I won't come. That's the line. I won't cross it. He nodded, solemn. Understood. The condition was clear, the boundary immovable. Respect was no longer optional. It was the foundation. On the final evening, before everyone scattered back to cities and routines, we returned to the beach. The long tables still stood, sand clinging to their legs. Someone had added more chairs, mismatched but sturdy, pulled from cabins and porches. Children squeezed in, cousins perched at the ends. No one worried about symmetry. There was always room for one more. As dusk fell, lanterns lit again. The lake mirrored it all. Firelight, faces, the wide arc of sky. For once, there weren't two reflections. Just one. I stood at the edge of the gathering, taking it in. Not perfect, not healed overnight, but different. A space made on purpose, not parceled out like rations. The words formed silently in my chest, heavy with truth. When they don't make room, you build it. And if you build it with honesty, the ones who belong will come. The ones who don't will fall away. Behind me, the lake shimmered, reflecting the sky so seamlessly that horizon and water became one. No longer two worlds, just one.